Not sure who I have with me. All I'm seeing is iPad 65, but I'm so glad you're here. We'll just give a minute here and wait and see if anyone else joins. I know a few people, some need to leave early. Oh, there it is. It's Denise. Hi.
Hi, Joanna.
So we have a couple of, we have one who'll be joining later and one who's supposed to be with us and needing to leave earlier today. So we'll just give a minute and see. And I'm gonna actually lean in closer when we're talking today so the sound is a little bit better. And do turn your volume all the way up in order to be able to hear me well. This is what we got to work with right now.
Absolutely. While we're waiting, can I just ask you about your Norwex? When you say that you use, like I have Norwex as well, but you say you use them even like for chicken and raw chicken and raw beef and everything?
Yeah, that's the whole reason why I got them is for when we clean up after the feeding the raw to the animals. I just use a cloth, wipe it, and rinse it under the hot water and keep going. Same cloth I use for everything.
And you've never had any issues?
Nope, not in over 15 years. That was the whole thing because there was a demo that was done where they actually showed with a black light after wiping up raw chicken and doing, have you ever seen that video?
No.
Oh, that was what sold me on Norwex right out of the gate. So it showed with a black light that literally there was like you were not spreading bacteria or doing anything with that, and it just blew me away. I'm gonna let Angela in here, but if you want to talk more about Norwex, feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp, and we can talk more about it too, and I can tell you some of my tips and stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you have Norwex as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just give a minute. Bernadine was supposed to be jumping on, so let's see, what time is it? Oh, it's just right on 12:30 here. So, Angela, you have the option too going on that Robin had.
Yes. But I'm like, why can't you? Oh, I know. I'm like, why can't you see me? I'm here. I had my video off apparently.
Oh, there you go. Okay, great. So we'll just give one more minute and then we'll get started and let anybody else trickle in. And Robin's going to be joining us a little bit later. So yeah, I'm so glad to have you all here today with me. And Angela, if you are having trouble hearing me, if you can just turn your volume up a little bit. Robin said that worked for her. Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here today. And anybody else joins us, then they can just come along as we go. So before we get started, I just kind of want to like ground and set our virtual circle. So if it's safe for you to do so, if you can put both feet flat on the ground and just be fully present. Close your eyes if that's safe or feels good for you. And let's just take a couple of breaths, down as far deep towards your belly as feels comfortable for you. Any thoughts of what you need to be doing later or things that are popping into your head, just notice them and let them pass on through and make a note to come back to it later so you can stay fully present here today. Coming into your body, being fully aware and present of your body, your space. Let's take a breath into that. And then just expanding your awareness out into the room that you're in, the space that you're in, out into our virtual space, creating a nice, beautiful circle, connecting us all here with beautiful pink and golden light. Imagine reaching out and feeling the hand of your sister next to you on either side of you as we create this circle of awareness and safety and love and presence, breathing into that. Feeling your heart soften, feeling your body soften in. Just staying present in this virtual space with all of us here today, whether you're present in this moment or you're joining us later on. And then just slowly coming back into the room that you're in at the moment while still keeping your awareness throughout. And then gradually opening your eyes as it feels right for you, coming back into the moment. Welcome. Yay. So today's module, I'm so excited about. This is our Vibrant Nutrition module. And what we're going to be teaching and talking about here today is basically the foundation of where I started almost, goodness me, like almost 25 years ago now, 24 years ago. And most of the material comes directly out of my book, Live Vibrantly, the 10 Steps to Maintain Youthfulness, Increase Your Energy, and Restore Your Health. Now, I wrote this book back in 2008. Actually, the picture was taken in 2008, but the book actually was in, I think around 2012, 2013-ish. I don't remember the dates in there. It was a while ago, is what my point is. But what's really cool about it is that, again, because of where most of this information came from and was resourced from, was from Doc Wheelwright, who you've heard me talk about already if you were in the Passion Play workshop. And last week, I think almost in every class, I'll be referencing, him and Dr. Tips, my teacher and my mentor, because I really wouldn't be here today with all of you without them. And what's really cool about, this legacy that Doc left behind was that so much of what he was sharing and teaching is not only still of value today, but we're understanding the deeper value of it even more and more today in our modern times. And, certain sciences are still catching up to what he was sharing and teaching from way back when. And so my point is that, what I'm teaching in this book and what I'm sharing in this book is still of value and valid today, even in, almost 2025. I would change a couple of little things, the way I've worded things and whatever, but I still stand by this completely. I have basically excerpted chunks of it into your handout today. And I kind of want to just go through it and then open it up to discussion and see if there's any questions, because I know there's often times, like I can share it, but let's talk about how that actually applies in real life. And it's way easier than you think it is. We always tend to make things way more difficult than they need to be. So that's why I want to open up space to talk about it, so we can actually talk, situations and see how we can fit this in for you. And so we're going to be talking about, I basically call it, Doc called it the 5+5. There was something, I think it's in here where he actually called it. And then I call it the Live Vibrantly way, because I've incorporated it into these 10-step blueprint, which is literally a way of life that I am, sharing with all of you. And this is how I live my life. This is how I have lived for, since I first started learning this information, which is almost, going on 25 years now. And it has radically changed my life and supported me through so many different challenges and traumas and situations. And I know that can be of great value to you as well, too. The other thing that we'll be introducing very briefly today and dive more deeper into in module 4 is the fasting window for us as women, because it's very important that we understand how to fast properly as women, because it's very different than men and how that fits in. So anything in your handout that is in italics in this next section here is where I have either slightly altered or added in something from the copy and paste from the book transcript. So just wanted to make that distinction there. And I realized I was going to put the Canadian link for the Amazon link to my book and the US link to my book in the handout. And I looked down at my handouts and realized I didn't do that. So I've gone back and I actually posted it up in the post in our group of where the module 3 handout is. So it's in the comments. There's the Canadian link and the US link in there. Oh, there's Bernadine. Okay, welcome Bernadine. We just, we're getting started here. And so we're just heading into the basics of eating the Live Vibrantly way and kind of the foundation of all of that. So it was in 2001 that I, was blessed to meet Dr. Jack Tips and be introduced to all of basically what I've been sharing a lot of, in the last classes and especially today. And as I mentioned in the Passion Play workshop, he studied and mentored with Doc Wheelwright, which is where a lot of this comes from. And so it's really Doc's teachings that make up the foundation of this 10-step blueprint that I write about in my book. And so one of the key things I want to highlight here too is that the principles that we're going to be talking about today, they can apply to whatever style of eating works for you. So I don't like to use the word diets, and I don't like all of these labels, like vegan, keto, paleo, like all of these things. I don't like to use them, but I do use them because I know that it helps when I'm referencing certain things because other people are familiar with those terms. So you get a picture of kind of what I'm talking about. So that's where they come from when I'm bringing those things in as well too. Okay. And so we're going to go through all of the 10 steps, but it's the first 5 that we're really going to focus on primarily in today's discussion. So I'm kind of just going to run through the 10 steps here. And again, this is like right out of my book. So the first one is eat a variety of organic plants, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and fruit, both raw and cooked. And we want to include herbs and spices in small amounts. And I'm talking about moderation, because otherwise a lot of these herbs and spices then move into the therapeutic realm. And we're looking at just using them in the food realm and the role that they play. If you recall from last week, we were talking about how a lot of these herbs and spices are the prebiotics that feed into the probiotics. And so this is where we're looking at how do we bring them into our daily meals in that role. Okay, number 2 is eat pasture-raised, wild-caught, sustainable animal proteins in small amounts, both cooked and raw. Now, I know it's a little bit confusing. I'm not necessarily talking about eating meat and whatnot raw, but I am talking about, like raw dairy and things like that. So that comes into the animal food categories. Now, I personally feel that there's definitely a place for grass-fed, pasture-raised, source butters, cheeses, eggs, offal, and animal meats in our diet. And I know that's not everybody's belief or what works for them. And so leaving that open to you to be able to tap into your own intuitive needs, but also understanding that without including animal foods, there are certain things that are lacking, and it just makes it more difficult. And from personal experience, what I've seen over the years is that those who tend to follow more of an entirely plant-based diet, there's very few that actually take the time to make sure that that diet is incorporating, or that way of eating is incorporating all of the necessary nutrition. It's not absolutely impossible, but it's a full-time job. And most people in our modern society don't take the time that's necessary to be able to do that. And hence we run into nutritional deficiencies and issues, especially in the hormone realm. And so I just wanted to put that out there, and which is, one of the main reasons why I include animal foods as well too. And of course, I think we can all, no matter what, agree that the way that commercial animal foods are raised is completely inhumane, and there's no place for that in our world. So I think we can all agree on that one, no matter what. Okay, moving on to number 3. Eat small amounts of traditionally fermented foods at every meal. Now, you'll notice the key point here is traditionally fermented. We're not talking vinegar ferments, which is what a lot of people often kind of lean towards, because those are the more, modern day version of what people think of with fermented foods. But we're looking at the traditionally fermented, usually using like a salt and water brine, or using a wild yeast or something like that to be able to actually facilitate and create the bacteria that we are looking for here. And it's these, healthy bacteria or these bacteria that support us to thrive that really support our microbiomes and our estrobolome, as we were talking about last week, right? I got distracted when I saw you, Robin. I was going to say hi. You're welcome. Okay, so we want, and just a little note here too, that if you do have, things such as candida overgrowth, dysbiosis, especially, not all fermented foods are necessarily going to work for you right off the bat, and you might have some issues incorporating them. And so this is where really coming to understand, your own body's needs. And this is where you can actually use your one-on-one session with me privately to discuss this, and we can look at how we can bring fermented foods in to support you in a way that's not going to cause extra gas and bloating and a little bit of a shock to your system right out of the gate. Okay, number 4, which we've touched on in other classes as well, especially last week, which was drink pure, clean water. If you can't get real spring water, then filtered is the next best thing. And Robin so graciously posted the information in the group for all of us about this incredible water system that I'm so excited she's introduced me to, and wanted her to share that with all of you. So that information is up in the group, and if you have questions or are in need, definitely reach out to her. Because this system is really economical. It's available in the US and in Canada. And it's something that if you don't have a system in place when you live and you're on city water, you definitely might want to take a look at this system. And we're not just talking drinking water here, as we were saying last week, we're talking shower, bath, like anything that touches, any water that comes into your home through a tap, basically, needs to be addressed, especially in our modern age.
I just
Did you
wanted to
want
share
that?
really quick too that through the rest of the year, the water company is offering free shower filters with your purchase as well. So yeah, pretty amazing that you not only can access clean water, but you can also get for free that shower filter.
That's exciting. Thank you so much, Robin. Appreciate that. Okay, number 5. Here's one. Fast. Don't eat continuously. Allow yourself to feel hungry between meals. Fast 1 day a week. And so, like I said at the beginning of this class, we're going to go into more depth about this in next week's module when we look at how to really do this properly and safely as women. And I just want to make an interesting note here. Like when I wrote this and when I was first introduced to all of this way back when, I didn't know anything about how to fast properly as a woman. And so, but I did incorporate the, trying to go 1 day a week without, eating, basically from like dinner the night before to dinner the next day. And sometimes that worked really well for me and other times it didn't. And I wasn't too sure, I could never understand what the disconnect there was. But now that I've learned what it means to actually fast properly as a woman, I understand that. And so we're going to be diving deeper into that. But this is something that was just such a huge part of traditional cultures and traditional way of living and life, and even religiously. Yes, I'm going to be bringing that up, Bernadine. That's one of my Bibles, and that's what we're going to be learning out of next week as well too. So Bernadine just mentioned a book, but I'll mention it. I actually have it in the notes and it's in your handout, so we'll talk about it shortly. But yes, so, and religiously, as well too, fasting has always been a huge part of, this role in this realm. And in this modern day and age, I see your hand, Angela. We have gotten to the point where people are just mindlessly stuffing their faces 24/7. And without even really noticing whether they're eating or not, and then we got into this whole, thing where it was, you need to be continuously grazing all day long and you need to be eating, smaller portions and just eating all the time. And it's really interesting when we go back far enough and we see where a lot of this so-called, information came from. It's very interesting who is promoting that. But what we realize now is how damaging that can be. Now, of course, if you have specific health challenges or issues, this is where working with somebody to develop a way of doing this safely really comes into play. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it on a therapeutic level in next week's module as well. Angela, did you have something you wanted to ask or comment on before we go on right here?
Yeah, if you're gonna dive deeper in, that's great, but I just would love a clarifying question is that I was doing intermittent fasting for a while and then somewhere along the lines heard that it was really bad for women in their reproductive year, so still having a period to fast at all or to do intermittent fasting. So I'm intrigued by this.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, like, is that not true? Or, and then you can carry on.
That's where learning how to fast like a woman comes into play. And I'm going to actually share the basic foundation of that after we get through all this part. So remind me if I don't talk more about it in that section, and make sure that I do. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see. So that was my note about, yeah, so like I even say in here, you know, full day fasting may not be for everybody right out of the gate. But there's ways that you can actually begin to work with your body to bring that natural hunger back in, because most people don't even actually know what real hunger feels like. We get emotional hunger confused with actual hunger. And of course, at different phases of our lives, when we're, you know, mothers and breastfeeding, then hunger takes on a whole new role. You know, so there's all these different things that we need to look at. So it's not just like a straight, you know, across the board, linear, like here's the rules, here's this, here's that. But what we're doing is laying the foundation with the thoughts and the principles, and then looking at how to customize. Okay, so those first 5 are the main ones that we're going to be focusing on, but I just want to go through the last few as well too. So number 6 was move every day, somehow, some way, for at least 10 to 20 minutes. And I love the example that I give here. Stagnant pools of water become a breeding ground for the wrong kind of bacteria, not the life-promoting kind. Your body is the pool. Keep the water moving. That's simple. And I'm not talking about hardcore physical exercise here. You'll notice I'm always making this distinction. I'm talking movement, which is very different. You know, if you look back at the way our bodies were originally designed to function, we were moving pretty much throughout our entire days. If you look at a child, you know, they're moving all the time. They're bending, they're twisting, they're somersaulting, they're hanging upside down, you know. So there's all these different movements that we are naturally inclined to. And because of our modern day lifestyle, as we get older, we tend to omit from our movement cycles, to our detriment, really. And that's why I love Tony Riddle's work, which we'll talk more about when we get into the mindful movement section. But you know, some basic things, really easy, like take the stairs instead of an elevator, right? If you're somewhere, park further away in a mall or a parking lot or whatever. Your vehicle is less likely to get dinged as well too from other people opening their doors into it. Walk, you know. If you can walk to your corner store instead of driving 2 seconds, then do that if it's safe and it's, you know, something that you could do as well too. Like just look at ways where, you know, you can actually incorporate more movement into your daily activities. And that's a really good, you know, noticing thing. Like just kind of notice how you move through your day and or lack of movement throughout your day, and where you could add in these tiny little movements, right? You know, even the way we move about our homes and the way we do things, and how much are we stepping outside if possible, as opposed to being inside all the time. So we want to move as much outside as we do inside. It's just something to start noticing. Number 7, sun. Expose yourself to real sunlight, daylight, without sunscreen for 20 minutes a day. Now, we already talked about this in module 1 when we were talking about looking at laying the foundations, you know, before we even got into the nutrition. And this little one, like exposing ourselves to natural light, is so huge, because this is laying the foundation for everything we do nutritionally to actually function properly in our bodies and the way that it's supposed to, and really support our hormone balance at this really deep cellular level. Number 8, breathe. Stop periodically throughout the day and take 3 to 5 deep belly breaths, especially before you eat. And I can't remember if I mentioned this or brought this up. I feel like I have kind of thrown this out there in a class somewhere along the way, but that might be my imagination. So I'm going to repeat it again. But it's really important whenever we sit down to any type of food that we're going to ingest. In order to turn on our digestive systems, we need to stop for a moment. And the easiest way to do it is to take 3 to 5 deep breaths. If prayer is a practice for you, or giving thanks to your food, like whatever that looks like, just taking a moment to acknowledge that you are about to switch gears from whatever you were doing to actually taking in this food. So giving thanks for it, blessing it, doing a Reiki charge on it, stopping to take 3 to 5 deep breaths. This is what takes our body from that fight or flight mode and puts us into rest and digest mode. And that is very crucial, because if we don't do that, then our body is really not capable of digesting the food that we're taking in this fight or flight mode. And we are actually doing ourselves more harm and damage to our digestive systems long term, and even in the short term, than we are by not eating in those moments. So that's really, really crucial. Did you want to say something, Angela? You unmuted.
Yeah, I have a friend who does 3 deep breaths. The first breath is just acknowledging the environment she's in, who she's with. The second is acknowledging the hands that prepared the food. And the third is the company. And I think it's a nice little, yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, number 9, sleep. Okay, we've already talked about this. Oh, hang on one second. I'm going to mention Leah here. Okay. Welcome, Julia. So we're on number 9 of the 10 steps in your handout, or the blueprint that we're talking about right now. So sleep. We already talked about this in module 1, about how crucial this is. And the bottom line is if we are not getting proper sleep and enough of it, it doesn't matter what else we're doing. It's going to be really hard for us to be thriving at any level, let alone having balance. Julia, could you just unmute yourself, please, love? Thank you. And, sorry, mute yourself, not unmute. Backwards there. So yeah, sleep is really the foundation of everything, which is why we covered it in that first module. Because like I said, without those foundational pieces in place, we can be doing all the things, in the Vibrant Nutrition realm, but they're not going to have the same benefits that they would if we had the other pieces already in place. And I find that if you have the other pieces in place, it's much easier to be able to work on these. Oh, here's Rebecca. Okay, letting Rebecca in. Welcome, Rebecca. All right. So we are just moving on to number 10 in the handout, which is the 10th step of the 10-step blueprint, which is love, right? Like, how can we not include this in any template for life, right? Or thriving at any level? If we can come from a place of love in everything that we do, primarily first and foremost for ourselves, because if we can't do it for ourselves, then we don't know how to do it for anybody else. So first and foremost for ourselves, and then we can turn that love back out into our loved ones, our family, our relationships, and to the world in general, and in everything that we do. Okay, so that's the 10 steps. Now, like I said, the first 5 are the ones that are in the nutritional realm that we're going to focus on at this point here. So we're continuing on. The next heading is Vibrant Nutrition, and this is again right out of my book still. So I'm talking about, when you examine the sample recipes in the book and you look at them, I know a lot of you here actually have my book, so you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, the link is up in the Thriving Hormones page group in the section. I forgot to put it in the handouts, but it's in the comments of the actual handout link in the Thriving Hormones group for anybody watching this afterwards as well too. So there's a certain theme that kind of runs throughout, all of the recipes and just kind of everything that we're going to be talking about as well too. And the whole premise is that the way we've put the food together is to be able to maximize the nutritional value of it. And here's the key part, make it bioavailable to you at a cellular level. This is really key, because if we are not taking in our nutrients and food in a way that our body can actually recognize and utilize, then it's putting stress on our bodies and we're not getting what we need. And this is where nutritional deficiencies come from. And I've seen, so many be like, oh, but I'm eating all of these foods and I'm doing all of these things, like, why am I not getting the benefit from it? And then we look at, how we're eating them and when we're eating them, and we make a few tweaks, and then it's like, oh my goodness, like night and day, right? So this is what I see all the time when I'm working in the one-on-one mentorships with women. I used to work with men and children and families as well too. So this is across the board, not just women, but I find women seem to, because of our hormone role here, seem to notice like the biggest shifts and changes along with children in doing this. And children is a whole other subject and conversation. I'm just going to preface that. So I'm gearing specifically to women and hormone balance here in this foundation. So like I said, the basic formula that we're talking about here came from Doc, and he called it, I forget, I mentioned the name of it somewhere. I think it was in the Passion Play workshop when I talked about it. I forget what it is now, but he basically called it the 5+5 equation. And so in the beginning of this class, I mentioned how Jack actually wrote the original book, the ProVita Plan, where this comes from, and which is like kind of the textbook that I studied and learned all of this from, besides working with him directly in 1992. And Doc was teaching all of this like way before that even. And so it's very interesting to me that these principles still apply. And as I said in the beginning of our class today, are of even more value as we are discovering today in our modern times than, most nutrition information. Like even me, from the time that I started nutrition school back in like 2000 to even by the time I graduated, some of the information that we were taught was already outdated. And that's something you see a lot in the nutrition field is, there were certain things that were like that all those way back in the 90s. There was certain principles and ways that were taught as the way of, this is how you be, this is a top nutrition education, basically. And now we've seen that completely scratched. But what I want to point out here is that it's always very important to look and see where the information that you're taking in is coming from. Who funded those studies? Who stood to gain from the information and knowledge being shared out? Those are the two primary things. And if we look back at a lot of the history and the things that are being promoted in the 90s, we can see where that was coming from and who was gaining from all of that. And it definitely wasn't us as individuals. Which is why I appreciate this information from Doc so much, is because it actually came from real life indigenous medicine people and tribes. And this is like cultural and knowledge that's been passed down through generations and from people that have continued to thrive. And so just want to preface that and share that out here. And this, again, this 5+5 equation is actually really simple. And we don't want to turn it into something that gets really confusing or really difficult. So what is this 5+5 equation that I'm talking about? Basically, it breaks down into two categories here. So with in the protein category, and we're using protein, carbohydrates or starch, and vegetables as a very general way of, breaking down macro and micronutrients here. Like, I mean, this can go so much deeper, but I'm keeping this very simple just for general conversation and to make things a lot easier as well too. So just know that. So in the protein realm, so foods that are recognized as protein, we want to have 1 cooked protein and 4 raw. And we'll dive into what that looks like and what that really is in a few minutes. And then the other part of the equation is the same thing. That's where the 5 plus the 5 comes from. Because with this 1 cooked protein and 4 raw proteins, the other part of it is 1 cooked vegetable or plant food with 4 raw. Okay, so 5 plus 5. And the reason for this specific combination, shall we say, is so that the complete amino acid profile is provided in every meal, pretty much, where you are incorporating this. Because what happens is our bodies are miracles. Like I'm always saying that, right? So if you don't have the full amino acid profile in your meal, your body will make up the difference. But I like to liken that analogy to, you know, a bank account per se. So say you're you know, putting $100 into your bank account, but then you withdraw $101 immediately afterwards. It's only $1. It's not a big deal. But what if you continuously do that day in, day out for a long period of time? It adds up. And that's where the stress really comes from on our bodies. And so, keeping that in mind, one of the other things too about, because there's a lot of, you know, controversy about cooked vegetables, raw vegetables, what's the best, you know, and so on. But this is where I'm always talking about variety as well too. You don't want to focus on any one particular food or food items or methods either. So it's important to have both lightly cooked and raw. And of course, we adjust the proportions of these according to the season. So right now we're in the fall season. So we're looking at more cooked and just a little bit of the raw on the side. Okay, I'm just gonna let Jasea in. Okay, welcome Jasea. We're actually talking about the 5 + 5 equation right now. So, yes, okay, there it was. And so one of the things that's really important is that we are getting different nutrient profiles from raw food as opposed to cooked food, which is another reason why it's really important to incorporate both. And so when you're looking at a cooked vegetable or plant food, being able to have the cooked and the raw combined, the cooked especially is where we get those RNA, DNA factors from. And this is what really supports us at a deep cellular level. Because it's these lightly cooked vegetables that provide the intercellular, the chromatin factors that are rich in the DNA and RNA. And these are the building blocks of how our body revitalizes itself. And simply put, these are just basically like little network carriers of nutrition that supports us at a cellular level, which you don't get from the raw vegetables. But from the raw vegetables and plants, you're going to get more of an enzyme foundation than you do from the cooked ones. And so it's really important that we incorporate all of these different methods of, you know, cooked foods, raw foods, as well as fermented foods in our repertoire, basically. And so, for example, like we get totally different nutrients from a cooked carrot than we do from a raw carrot than we do from a fermented carrot that's traditionally fermented, like in a saltwater brine. And so these are just some of the examples that I wanted to, you know, highlight and bring up here. And so we have the basic 5 + 5 equation. And then to that, we add in some healthy fat and something fermented. And in the book, I'm, you know, been trying to be funny and I'm saying not necessarily alcoholic, just in case that's where you were heading in that direction there. So that's not what we want to include in our 5 + 5 fermented part of our meal. But if you bring in these traditionally fermented aspects of it with the healthy fat and the 5 + 5, then this is where you have, and if you are familiar with any of my stories, I'm always posting up my fast and easy break the fast meal in my Instagram stories. And I'm always talking about complete nutrition and macro and micronutrients being provided within that meal. And I kind of go through a breakdown of that plate. So if you're not following me on Instagram and that is of interest to you, then do that and you'll see I'm actually finally getting back up online again. My signal is getting better at my place. So I'm posting these meals back up again and going through these little breakdowns, and I always welcome questions or comments as well too. So if you see something that I'm posting up and you're like, wait a minute, I don't understand why you're doing this, or how does this come into play, or isn't that breaking the rules, then, you know, message me and let's talk about that. And that's why I can go deeper with all of you and your, you know, personal questions as well too. And so, you know, like I said, I don't like to put, you know, labels on things. I don't like to use the word diet. I don't like to, you know, use vegan, vegetarian, traditional, paleo, keto, You know, I mean, there's always new names out there, like every day time I turn around, I can't even honestly keep up with half of them, but for the sake of, like I said, many of you recognizing them, I will use them when I'm labeling recipes or referring to something because I know that gives you a visual. You know, and I think one of the biggest gifts that I am giving you all here, besides this equation, so to speak, is how you can literally translate any recipe or anything that you are making and turn it into, you know, one of these complete macro and micronutrient meals really simply. That's where I said it doesn't get that, it's not that difficult, right? And we tend to like just kind of start spinning out, being like, oh, but I can't do this and then I can't do that. But you know, it's the same thing as like, well, we have a problem, here's the solution, right? Instead of getting stuck in the problem, like, okay, this ingredient doesn't quite work with this, so what can I swap out for that? And what can I change? Or what could I leave out? You know, and so that's one of the things that I just love geeking out on. So if you like have a recipe that's like your favorite recipe or something that you make all the time, post it up in the group and be like, how can I turn this into, you know, a Live Vibrantly Way meal, and make it even more bioavailable to me at a cellular level. And I'd be happy to like do that for you. Like I said, I love geeking out on that. It's like so much fun for me. And I just get so much joy out of it. And you know, this is how we all get to learn from each other as well too, right? And a lot of my recipes are my recipes, but a lot of them are ones that I've been inspired by other ones that I've seen that I've completely remade or remodeled and turned them into ones that fit this equation. And that's how you make it yours, right? So this is how you take these principles and you turn them into something that is yours, that's uniquely yours and that works for your life. If you happen to have the handout printed out in front of you or you're following along digitally, there's a daily breakdown on the page there. And if I hold it up here, hopefully you all see that. And so this is kind of the daily percentage of how you want to incorporate your foods. And so you'll see here, the first one is 70% vegetables or plant foods that are lightly cooked and or raw. So that's a large portion of your daily intake, right? And that's kind of contrary to, you know, unless you're following a completely plant-based diet, what most people are, you know, taking in. And I think I've talked about this, you know, traditional, like standard American diet and whatnot. And even when we go out to eat, you know, the portions on the plate tend to be more of the heavier starches and the proteins and, you know, not so much on the vegetable category or the plant category. So what we're looking for is 70% throughout the day is from the plant or vegetable category. And then we add in what I like to call the condiments. So we have 15% cooked and raw protein. And then we have 5% fermented, which is the traditional ferments that I was talking about. And then we have 5% that are healthy fats and oils. And that would be very minimal on the seed oil use in this category here. And then we have 5% complex carbohydrates or heavier starches, as I often refer to them. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. And if you flip over, I have an example. So I've kind of put together an example of what like a protein plate could look like. And I'll just read it off because I can't read it up like that. But for example, the vegetables. So you would have 4 raw and 1 cooked, it would be 70% of your plate also in that given meal. And that could be, you know, a salad with raw carrots, cabbage, tomatoes, a sprout medley, lightly roasted broccoli, and then or a raw vegetable soup and roasted fennel, right? So there's the different ways we can approach that. In the fermented category, which would be 10% of your plate, we have like sauerkraut or lacto-fermented veggies. We have an unpasteurized raw miso, or it could be like a raw yogurt or a kefir in a salad dressing in your meal, for your meal as well too. And then we have the protein, and this is where we have the 4 raw and the 1 cooked, and this is 10% of your plate. And so, for example, I just have here a chicken thigh with pumpkin, sesame, sunflower seeds, a combination of a sprout medley, and say a little bit of a raw cheese on there. So you can see that the chicken thigh would be your cooked protein. And then we have the seeds and the sprouts and the raw cheese, which make up the raw proteins. In my book, I actually have a whole list at the back, a resource list of what, all these different proteins could be, because the cooked ones tend to be a lot easier, but the raw ones we tend to get hung up on a little bit because we're not familiar with a lot of them are. And actually, I'd like to, I'm just checking the time here. Yeah, I'm hoping to leave enough space at the end to share some of those with you as well too here. And then in the fats and the oils, which is 10% of your plate, I have avocado and black olives added to your salad. So this is like a healthy fat in our food, right? So, and then I have a hemp or coconut or an olive oil that you use a little bit of in the dressing, which you can mix with your unpasteurized miso in a dressing. You can mix with a little bit of raw yogurt into a dressing as well too. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can start to put things together. I just want to talk really quickly about food as the foundation of our health. And as I was saying before, the things we've talked about in the previous modules, including the Passion Play opening workshop that we did, laying the foundation with all of those things before even getting to this actual food realm. I feel very strongly now at this point in 24 years of working in this realm that it's important to have those pieces in place first in order to actually be successful in really coming to making some of these changes in our food realm. Because what happens is we might make changes, but they're not irreversible changes if we don't already have this other foundation in place. And so that is why I am stressing these other pieces before you even get it to this point. Okay. And so I always like to say, life equals life. You are only as alive as the life in the food you take in. If you're taking in dead food, then don't expect to be thriving. And don't expect to stay alive for a really long time and enjoy that life either, because there's no sustenance there. The body, again, is so miraculous. It will find a way to keep going, but it's not a whole lot of fun. And we could actually be thriving at such a deeper level and just having so much more peace and grace and joy in our lives. And that's what I want everybody to be able to experience. And so by incorporating these principles that we're learning, as well as looking at the quality of our food, right? So we want to be taking in real food that's been grown in soils that are healthy, environments where there's love, in the tending of the food, in the raising of the food, in the harvesting of the food, whether it's animal foods or plant-based foods. Plant foods are energy and frequency as well too. And so it's really important that we remember all of this and that we are part of that matrix. And so that is where we get to thrive from, is when the frequency and the energy of the food that we're taking in is at its highest source as well too. And so it applies on every spectrum of this whole realm here. And so, food tends to be our main source of nourishment for our physical body, as we were talking about. It provides the fuel for every function. What you put in your body dictates how you're going to move through your day, as we've been talking about here. And so one thing I want to just kind of talk about a little bit here is our microbiomes as well too. We touched on this with the estrobolome last week. But there used to be the old saying, you are what you eat, but these days it's more, you are what you feed your microbiota. And that's basically our microbiomes, or the pathogens that support us to thrive, or the bugs that support us to thrive. And there are these bugs that actually live in us as well as on us. Like our skin is one of our biggest biomes that we have, and it's our first line of defense. Remember when we were talking about the lung meridian, how it really ties into our skin, which is not something that a lot of people think about. Okay, so one thing that I want to highlight in connection with our biomes is inflammation. Inflammation is a huge problem these days, and especially as women, and especially as we age, inflammation seems to really creep in there. can come from injury, it can come from stress, especially depending on what's going on in our lives and how we are responding to the stressors in our lives as well too. And so our bacteria balance, our biomes plays a huge role in inflammation. And so that's why if inflammation is creeping up for you as a challenge for you, this is a communication from your body that your biomes are out of balance. And this is, we go right back to the gut microbiome first and foremost, because it starts there. And like I said, we have biomes throughout our entire body, internally as well as externally. But we always go to the gut microbiome first because that's the foundation one. That is where we digest, process, and eliminate. And so if that primary function is not thriving, then nothing else in our body can be thriving. And so this is why we come back to this as our primary foundation of. And what's really important here too, to keep in mind, is that this affects us on a mental level as well. And affects our neurotransmitters. And it's our vagus nerve, right, that connects the gut brain. I always call it our superhighway, our information superhighway, right? So the information is going from our guts to our brains, it's traveling on the vagus nerve, but it's also the bacteria that we need for a lot of this information in order to get from point A to point B, and or to be utilized once it gets to that point as well too. And so if we're missing even just one tiny little bacteria, we're missing out on the whole process of something. And that over a long period of time is our body starts to speak to us louder and louder and be like, hello, we have a serious disconnect here. Like we are missing something and we really need to pay attention to this. And also looking at that and realizing that unless it's a nutritional deficiency or through injury, there's often an emotional that has allowed this disruption to begin first and foremost, and then it has continued on into a physical disruption. And then that's where the signal gets louder, starts off as a little whisper and then gets louder, trying to get our attention. And so that's where I'm always talking about things being information. And thank you so much, Bernadine, for joining us. So glad to have you. And so this is what really affects our mental health and our brains as well too. And so things like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and a lot of these things that women tend to deal with. Yes, having a healthy sexual life supports the microbiome, and vice versa. It goes both ways as well too. And so that's the thing too. There's no just one pathway. Like everything goes both ways in the way that it supports. And so a lot of things like celiac, leaky gut, dysbiosis, these are all things that tie back into this disruption of our digestive systems and our gut microbiomes. And so that's why, and even autoimmune issues all trace back to a gut disruption, primarily first and foremost, that allowed it to progress into that point. And like I said, the autoimmune is the louder message, coming up at that point to try and get our attention. And so I'm not going into detail about that at this point, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I've kind of touched on this on and off, and just kind of leave that with you to just notice and think about. And if you want to talk more about this in your one-on-one session, once you schedule that with me, then we can do that as well too. And so I'm actually, oh, here it is. I missed a page. So there's some fun facts about your microbiomes here that I've included, how it can control our thoughts and feelings, and the huge role that it plays on our hormone health. One of the things is the hormone leptin. It really affects the leptin receptors in our brains, which control our appetite and tell us when we're full and how we store fat in our bodies. And so that can really be playing a role in how you either gain weight or lose weight, depending on what your needs are. And so really quick, looking at our meals. And so we have, basically in most people's traditional realms, we have 3 meals a day. So I'm going to talk about all 3. We have breakfast, which I often can, or break the fast meal, as I call it. And this is one of the more important ones of the day, because our bodies are most primed first thing in the morning to be able to receive nutrients, especially protein with the amino acids and everything that's available in our bodies. And this this is what sets us up for the rest of the day and how we sleep through the night as well too. And so a little saying that I often like to use is you want to eat breakfast like a queen, lunch like a princess, and then it's supposed to be dinner like a peasant, not pauper. I didn't get to, I forgot to change that word. So it's supposed to be peasant. And so, you know, breakfast is going to include a combination of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, not heavy starches though. And I'll talk about where to bring those in a little bit later on, because heavy starches are what actually support us to prepare for the night's sleep and to wind down for the day. So when we're including heavy starches earlier in the day, that's why so many people struggle to actually get going and then need more stimulants throughout the day as well too. And so your traditional oatmeal is not necessarily best for your break the fast meal, but it's something that you could flip into your dinner meal, which is why I'm always talking about, you know, flipping your meals around, like have dinner for breakfast and breakfast for dinner. And even just like using that analogy helps to be able to start making that shift there. And I know for some people eating breakfast is really hard. I know for me, like I spent half my life not eating breakfast, but of course came to realize eventually that that was due to nutritional imbalances and also autoimmune that I was not aware of at that time, and how it really affects our thyroids as well too. And so if you're incorporating lunch, you want to eat like a princess or smaller portion. So breakfast is the largest portion of the day. Lunch is the smaller portion from that. And it's kind of the medium one. Now, I just want to make a note here that a lot of people, you know, especially if you work a traditional job, tend to be just sitting at your desk and like inhale. And even if you're an entrepreneur working at home, I see this happening so many times. You're sitting there and you're just inhaling food while you're working on something else. And it's really important, like I said, to just kind of stop, take a moment, acknowledge the food, switch gears, take less time and eat less food, but concentrate just on that instead of, you know, trying to multitask while you are taking in food, because that will completely disrupt digestion. And then that's really contributes to that 2 o'clock afternoon dive that most people tend to experience. When I worked in a corporate office, oh my God, that 2 to 3 o'clock time period, everybody was in the break room pouring coffee, drinking sugary drinks, monster drinks, and like all of these like caffeinated things and sweet treats and all kinds of stuff just to keep going. You know, whereas if we had been able to combine our meals in a much more efficient way earlier in the day, that doesn't happen. Okay, then we have dinner like a peasant. And so what that means is dinner is your lightest meal of the day and your smallest meal of the day. And oftentimes the less ingredients, the better as well too, especially if you do have digestive issues. And then this is the place, like I said, where your heavier starches come in. So if you were having, you know, say a protein and vegetable meal for your break the fast meal and your lunch, for your dinner, you could have just a heavier starch by itself. So literally just a bowl of oatmeal. Or you could, this is where you bring in at this time of year, like the heavier squashes. Like I love to roast my squashes up and have them for dinner at the end of the day. Like they're just so warming and so grounding. And then that's where it's just like kind of sets up that perfect ambiance for that beautiful night's sleep, right? And then also times too throughout the day when I am making meals, not just a dinner, even though I only mentioned dinner here in the notes, I'm often making extra food so that I have food already prepped and ready to go for moments when our family just doesn't have, you know, time to actually stop and cook a meal. And then that way we have kind of like a little, you know, to go restaurant in your fridge. And I love my batch cooking. It's a little bit harder in our current, you know, transitional stage that we're in. But even when I cook a meal, I always cook at least a double batch so that I have at least one other meal for the family prepared and ready to go. So I'm not cooking every day. But if you can fit a big batch prep day into your schedule and then only, you know, cook, like I used to only cook 2 days a week, and then we would just eat out all the food that I made on those 2 days. And that's pretty amazing. That opens up so much space, especially for women as entrepreneurial women and family and whatnot, to have more time to be able to do other things if that works for you. It doesn't work for everybody. Just throwing it out there. And then, if we are doing fermenting and any of those things, you know, those things sometimes can feel really overwhelming. But if we just stop and take a moment and realize that often, yes, these things take a long process, but our involvement is often just like a 5-minute here, 10-minute here kind of thing. So they might not be as overwhelming as you had personally thought. And I'm bringing that up because we're going to be talking about some traditionally what to do with nuts, seeds, and legumes and grains in a minute. But now this is where I want to bring in the fasting real quick, and then we'll go into Q&A. So Dr. Mindy Pelz, Fast Like a Girl. Every woman should have her book and use it as a Bible. I was already, like I said, doing docs, 1 day a week fasting, but like I said, I couldn't understand why that didn't always work or feel so good. And so the reason for that is because depending on where we are at in our menstrual cycle, it's important that we note that certain times we should not be fasting at all. And at other times we want to do smaller windows, and other times we can do longer windows. And so the basic windows are days 1 through 10 is when we can do 13 to 72 hour fasts if you are a menstruating woman. Days 11 to 15, you're only looking at a 13 to 15 hour max on that fasting window. Days 16 to 19, this is where we can go back up to the 13 to the 72 hour fast. Days 20 to the first day of bleed, no fasting. Okay, and so we're going to talk more about this, and she goes really deep into all of it in her book. And we're going to touch on that in module 4 when we're looking at basically how to eat to support our cycles and how to bring in the fasting as well too. But I just wanted to give you these windows here today since I've talked about them and I've mentioned them. So Angela, to answer your question about the intermittent fasting, during ovulation, which is that days 11 to 15 in that area, is where you have the shortest window. So intermittent fasting, if it feels right, can happen in those places, but don't go and play with it personally. Like, it's a general rule, 13 to 15. You might only do well with like an 8-hour fast in between there. It depends on what's going on in our lives too. Like, how stressed are we? What is going on? What season is it? In summer, it's often easier to do the longer fast. And in winter, our bodies are just like, I'm really feeling that the shorter fast is more appropriate here. And so this no fasting right up until the first day of bleeding or the first day of your menstrual cycle. You can fast on that first day if it feels appropriate for you. I know for myself, when I was menstruating, and for a lot of women that I've worked with, they don't want food automatically on that first day. For a lot of women, it's just naturally almost fasting that first day. So again, it's, checking in with yourself. Like, these are templates, these are principles. But check in with yourself and check in with your body and ask, does this feel good right now for you? Is this something you want to do? Or we can try it, and if it doesn't feel good, then we can switch gears, or we can modify as we need to. And this is where I just want to throw into, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before or not, but this is where the bone broth fasting really comes into play too. Just having bone broth on your fast days to start off with can be really beneficial in helping you to begin implementing these fasting cycles if it's not something that you're used to or that you're struggling with. As well too, because bone broth tends to keep us in the benefits of a fasting state, but actually is still supporting us at the same time as well too, with some specific nutrients. And it's psychological as well too, comes into play here, because we're like, oh, I have bone broth I can fall back on instead of I'm not having any food, right? And it's very interesting how our subconscious stories really come into play and come up when we start bringing fasting into our lifestyles. And she talks about this in her book as well too. And so real quick, I just want to talk about the activation of foods. And so I've included a blog post. I just copied and pasted the whole thing right in here, called Back to Basics 101, Soap, Nuts, Seeds, Legumes, and Grains. Now, this is really, I think a lot of people are familiar with the fact that, you know, nuts, seeds, legumes, and grains should, at the very least, be soaked before consuming them. And the reason for this is because there's enzyme inhibitors, there's phytates, and there's basically what's often referred to as anti-nutrients, you know, in these foods here. And so if you think about it, when a seed falls on the ground in nature, right, not all of them just automatically sprout right away. They have to get rained on. Some of them have to get burned in fire. Some have to be consumed by animals and ingested and then pooped back out in order to be able to actually sprout. So it's a process, and there's all of these things that needs to happen before the life in that seed becomes available, which is the sprout. And that applies to all of our nuts, seeds, legumes, and grains. And so it's very important, if we are incorporating these foods in our daily repertoires, that we are at the bare minimum soaking them, or this is where the blessing of our modern world comes into play. You can actually purchase activated nuts, seeds, legumes, and grain seeds, and you don't have to do it yourself. And so, you know, I know for like ourselves and our family right now, it's just really difficult for me to be able to incorporate that step into our lives, which it was been a part of my life for, like, you know, 20 years. So we are, and I am actually still doing it. I take that back. I'm still, you know, soaking and sprouting my quinoa and, you know, the things that we're incorporating. And I actually done up huge batches of nuts and seeds for whatever reason. I don't know why I was doing it at the time, but I had actually culture soaked them, sprouted them, and then froze them. Some of them just like that, and other ones I had already dehydrated and they were all ready to go, because that's how I tend to do. Like, I only do it every couple of months. I do large batches, and then I put them in glass jars and I freeze them in the freezer. And so then that way you're not continuously doing it, but it's a good way to incorporate this into your life. But like I said, like, so right now I'm, you know, every time we go to eat quinoa, I'm doing, you know, I don't have my culture soak right now, so I'm doing like an overnight soak with a light sprout, and then cooking it down that way. And so I also give you, you know, I go into more detail here in the blog post about why that's important, some fun facts, and I give you also the basic recipe for how to do that, and also a recipe for how to use culture soaked cashews, activated. That's the term that is used for something that's been culture soaked, sprouted, and then either cooked or dehydrated, is activation, because you've activated the life in it. And that's the thing, you know, why a lot of people have reactions to nuts and seeds and legumes and grains, even is because they're trying to eat it in the state where the life has not been activated. And it's extremely harmful and hard on our digestive systems, especially when that's done continuously day in and day out for a very long period. And so that's why I've incorporated this information here in our handout for today. And so I think I hit my goal. Yes, I wanted to leave like the whole last part open because I know you all are dying to ask questions, and I don't have the chat up. So if you put something in, question in the chat, feel free to ask me that now. And so it's all yours. Okay, just say it. You're going first there.
Yes.
What's the question? What do you want to say?
So did I hear you right with when you should fast? It sounded like it's okay to fast during your bleed, according to that. Okay.
Yes, it is. But like I said, that's where you want to just kind of tap into your own body too. I know from my own personal experience was I didn't want food that first day. Like, there's no way food was going anywhere near me that first day. And I know that's the same for a lot of other women. Other women are just like, oh no, please give me food. So, you know, follow your body's natural intuition and guidance, and know that if you choose to fast on that first day, that is a safe day to do that. Does that make sense?
So but just the first day?
No. So, okay, let me go back over those. Where's
No,
that?
I understand. Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
done.
So days 1 to 10 is 13 to 72 hours. Right? So that would be from the day of the first bleed to the 10th day. You can do anything from 13 to 72 hours safely, should you feel called to do so.
Okay.
And then during the ovulation part is where you want the shorter window. It's 13, like on days 11 to 15. That's a 13 to 15 hour. You don't want to be doing any of the longer fasting during that time period. It's not recommended. Okay. Days 16 to 19 after that phase, then that's where you can go back to the 13 to 72 hour longer fast, should you feel called to at that point. And then from day 20 until that first day, no fasting.
Okay, so there's only one phase where you shouldn't and other ones where you can at different intervals
Exactly.
into this. Okay. And then the other thing, I don't know if I heard you right about when you do like massive sprouting of the nuts and seeds. If you can't get to, did you say you dehydrate what you can and the other ones go in the freezer?
You are the one who got me testing that. Remember, you said
Yeah.
you saw somewhere in a forum or a group somewhere?
Yeah.
And so I actually did test that out. I did a whole bunch of legumes and I did a whole bunch of nuts and stuff. And I did them all the way through. So I culture soaked them, I sprouted them, and then I just froze them right in that state. And it worked totally fine. There was like I had no issues with anything. You know, and from the research that I did, it did not affect it nutritionally either. And so if you find yourself in a place where, oh my God, I've started this process, but I don't have time to like actually put it on the dehydrator, or you lose power or something like that, and you don't want to be running the dehydrator, but you have a generator for your freezer, you can just package them, throw them in there, or put them in a cooler outside at this time of year, depending on where you live, and know that they'll be okay. You just want to keep them cold at that point. You don't want fluctuating temperature. That's not good. But if you keep them at a consistent cold temperature before dehydrating, then they're still going to be fine. And then you can take them out at that point and you can put them in the dehydrator. But know that it takes longer at that point because you've got the moisture from, them. Sometimes what I do is I just put them on a paper towel and defrost them first, let some of that moisture get out. So as soon as that big thaw starts to happen and the moisture is dripped out, then I put them on the trays and put it in the dehydrator. So yeah. So thanks for introducing me to that, because now we know that that works as well too. And I was
Oh, good. Good. That's all I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there'll be more.
okay. So who else? Does anybody have questions about the 5+5 equation? Does anybody want to give me a sample meal that they eat on a regular basis that we can rework? Like any comments? Is this new to everybody? Have you heard this before? How does it feel hearing this information? I love it. Silence. Rebecca, you're not unmuted if you're trying to talk to me. Okay, you're driving, so you can't really talk right now, is what I'm thinking you're saying, because you're pulling over. Yeah, you're still muted. Okay, all right. Bye, Rebecca. Okay. Anybody else? Julia, if you're there, did you have any questions? Denise, anything? I know you've read my book, I think, so I was curious how, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have tried to switch out some of these things or do some of these things and how that went for you, would you be open to sharing some of that experience with us? You don't have to. Whoops.
I won't today. I have to
Okay.
be honest. That when I moved, I packed it away somewhere very safe, and I have not unpacked that box yet. So I'm looking forward.
Gotcha. No
You can
problem.
moving piece.
Yeah, no, definitely. But that's cool though, because now if you have the handout, then you have some of the basic foundational, principles in there. And then you have this replay now that you can go back to as well until you actually find your book. So anybody else? Robin, did you have anything that you wanted to?
I'm I just have a curiosity. I'm curious if you've used the fasting water programs on the Mag Healy while fasting.
Oh, you know what? I'm glad you asked me that question. I was just starting to play with that before my life got turned upside down. So I haven't, although I am still incorporating fasting in my, regular cycles right now. I have not been doing that, but what I've been doing is I have a new practice where every day I do the Blue App scan with
Mhm.
the water atmosphere, along with my digital nutrition. And I have been sending myself those frequencies. And what's really interesting is on days where I'm doing like longer intermittent fasting, or just, choosing like not to eat because I'm not hungry, or my body just says I don't feel like eating right now, or I don't feel like eating today. I do a lot, I like to do the dinner to dinner fasting, works really well for me. And since I'm postmenopausal, I use the moon as my calendar to be able to work with the days of the cycle based on the information that I shared here today. So for somebody who is does not have a cycle or is postmenopausal, using the moon as your calendar just to be able to correlate to the days is a good way to be able to incorporate that. And so I've noticed on the days when I'm doing that and I do the Blue App scans, the fasting ones will come up in the scan.
Oh, interesting.
So it'll come up fasting, like whatever the morning one is, depending on what I'm doing, it will actually correlate to the timing of my meals. Even when I'm eating, sometimes I only eat one meal a day, sometimes I eat 2 meals a day. I just listen to my body and do whatever it tells me it wants at this stage. And it's really fascinating how, since I started doing that water atmosphere scans with the Blue Apps, that has totally been reflecting back what I'm doing and the cycles that I've been using to eat throughout the day. Somebody has I guess I raised my own hand. I was like, what is that? Okay, Denise, did you want to ask or comment about that?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about what you're talking about with your moon and the coordination of that with the fasting.
Oh, okay. So the days that I gave for the fasting windows, like days 1 to 10. So days 1 would be the new moon.
Okay.
And then day 11 to 15 kind of it basically breaks down into the moon cycles. So day 11 to 15 is the full moon part.
11 is the full moon?
I'm sorry?
11 to 15 is the full moon?
Yeah, because that's the ovulation. So that usually traditionally correlates to the full moon.
Okay.
So yeah, if you just remember that day 1 is a new moon, and ovulation mid-month is full moon. So the full moon, that's where you do the shorter 13 to 15. And then the rest of the time, and as postmenopausal women, it's not as necessary to include that no fasting phase in the last part of the moon cycle. Although for me personally, I found that I'm often not called to fasting in those final days leading up to the new moon again. Whereas as soon as we hit into the new moon, I'm like, yep, let's do a fast today. But that's just me personally. So this is where I wanted everybody to kind of get into, and this is like your love missions for this week. 3 are, if you're not tracking your cycle already, whether manually or using an app, start doing that. And if you are postmenopausal or don't have a cycle, then just use the moon as your calendar for that, and be able to base it off of that. And start applying, some of the principles that we've talked about here today with the Live Vibrantly way. If you're not already adding a little bit of a combination of microgreens or sprouts to all your meals, start with that. That one's like really easy. And it provides it's like taking a multivitamin and a digestive enzyme with your meals. So it really helps out a lot, especially if you're not getting into the food combining right away. And if you feel called to it, try playing with some of the 5+5 and see how that feels. And if you do, I would love if you would like post a picture of your meal where you're incorporating it, and choose why, explain why you chose that piece and anything that came up for you. If there's anything that is triggered in you or how you felt afterwards. And the one that I talked about that I didn't put in here that I threw in there was if you have a recipe or something that you want to know how to, tweak and swap out into this, Live Vibrantly way of being combined. So we have all of our macro micronutrients, then post it on up. Anybody who's watching this later on, post it on up. I'd be happy to, guide you and, give you some ideas on how you could make that a more bioavailable meal for yourself and for your family. So, okay.
May
Denise?
may I just ask about the kefir?
Yes.
With being dairy free, is coconut kefir, or how do you speak about that piece?
Well, water kefir is completely dairy free.
Okay.
There's two different kinds of kefir. There's dairy kefirs, and then
Okay.
there's water kefir. Now, water kefir is the one that I've always worked with because it is most compatible to everything. And water kefir is completely non-dairy, and it's not triggering for most people. It's just a bacteria that you feed sugar water to, and you can use that to actually do all of your culture soaking to make your second ferments, like sodas or beverages or anything. And I use it to make bread. I was making all my own breads with the water kefir as the culture as well too, and place it instead of like a sourdough starter. And so I have a whole system that I've created around water kefir, and I have a whole course called Ancient Traditions for the Modern Kitchen that will be coming back to life next year in 2025. So stay tuned, where we actually go through all of that. And that's modules in that because it's the foundation of everything. And then we actually go through in the course and the program all of the culture soaking, the fermenting, the sprouting, the bone broths, like just basically setting up all of these ancient traditions in your modern kitchen for a way that works for you. And like I said, it can feel really overwhelming when you start looking at it. But once you realize that it's just like, 5 minutes of your time here to set it up and then check on it occasionally, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, maybe 15 minutes at the end, of a several day process, ultimately you're putting in less than 30 minutes in a lot of these things. And yet that 30 minutes can pay you back so huge in the realm of nutrition and what you were able to open up for yourself and for your loved ones in the quality of the food and the life that is in the food that you are able to supply at that point is really huge. I was going to done it yet. I wanted to take a picture because I caught myself doing this morning. So I had my, jar of chicken bone broth. And then I had my little jar of French gray sea salt, like the crystals. And that's my collagen and that's my minerals. So I take a couple of big scoops. I happen to be one of those ones, I call it chicken jello. I just eat it cold right out of the jar because it's like chicken jello. My sister thinks it's disgusting, but my mom and I absolutely love doing that. So, and I always say, don't knock it till you try it. It's really good. Or you might not like it, but that's one thing that I do. So that's my morning. That's my collagen. I'm taking it off of my bone broth. And then I have my, like I said, my French gray crystals, salt crystals. Take a pinch of those, put those under my tongue, let that dissolve. Drink, a big glass of clean water. That's my mineral supplement. So there's my collagen, my amino acids, and my mineral supplement right there with 2 foods that I'm using like a supplement first thing in the morning. And so that's really what I am, bringing to the table here too, is how do we use food as that foundation? It's great when we can go and purchase supplements and have all of these awesome things that we can bring into, our toolkits and into the mix. But what happens if you don't have access to that? All of a sudden it's all gone. Then what? Right? So knowing how to be able to have that basic foundation of what it takes to thrive in your own hands and in a way that you can facilitate, I feel personally is really huge. And then having that foundation, then, if you are blessed to have access to other things, then we can, start bringing in those other things as well too. You have a foundation, you can always come back to that no matter what. And, I always say this about the whole, like, Live Vibrantly way with the 5+5 principle and whatnot. You're not going to die if you don't eat like that on a regular basis. And if you have any digestive issues or you have any autoimmune challenges, eating this way can really support you to begin to repair at a level that supports you to move beyond those things. And, you know, again, we're laying the foundation for you to figure out what that healing really is for you and to be your own medicine woman with all of these pieces and elements, right? So that's why we're layering in every module, we're layering in another layer of the picture of the foundation here. So I hope that all of you are starting to be, you know, get the sense of that and to feel into that and realize what you really have at your fingertips here. And this is something that you can utilize for life, right? This is not just, oh, this works in this moment, but this is things that you can adapt and utilize for your entire living time here on this planet, and also share with your loved ones as well too. And so that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this out with all of you. And it doesn't stop with you. I'm sharing it out with all of you so you can take it and share that out with people. You know, if you're excited about it, be like, oh my God, hey, check out what I'm learning. This has been my experience with it. And I would just love to share this with you. Or, you know, prepare a whole, what I love doing is having friends over and preparing a whole meal. That's all the Live Vibrantly way. And it gives people an experience of a meal that feels so amazing when they leave. You know, they're not like falling over, like, oh my God, my gut is just like, oh, I ate too much, or it doesn't feel good, or I can't even stay awake for this conversation, you know, kind of thing. So just some things, throwing that up there to you all. So, okay, if there is no more comments or questions or anything at this point, then I guess we can wrap this up here. So, any last minute anything? Can I sprout my store-bought quinoa? Yes, Julia, you can. I actually I have the big bags of organic quinoa that we got at Costco, and oh, sorry, test of our emergency broadcast system. Lovely. Okay, so yes, you can totally you know, your store-bought quinoa, like whatever. And especially if it's not an organic source, then soaking it, doing the soak in the sprout is really important as well too, because you're going to help kind of remove, you know, some of the toxicity of it as well too. And that's where the culture soak really comes in, because it really breaks all of that, you know, down. Now, I will make a note, when you're doing quinoa, it's really important before you actually soak it, wash it 2 to 3 times. So just kind of like swish it around, you know, put some water in there, use your hand. I don't know if you're used to washing rice, but with my Asian background and culture that I grew up in, we were always washing rice. So you do the same thing with the quinoa. You rinse it, you wash it, just kind of like wash it around, and the water will be a little bit cloudy, rinse it off. You know, put your as a block so you don't lose all your quinoa, because it'll all come out of the pot at that last part there. And do that like 2 to 3 times, and then do your soak. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I actually do it, make this super easy, because like, again, I have lack of space. I actually soak mine, I wash it and soak it right in my Instant Pot overnight. And then the next morning when I'm ready to cook it off, I actually just stick it right in, pull the pot out, stick it right in, and add a little bit more liquid to it. And depending whether I'm actually cooking it as quinoa or turning it into porridge, because we love, you know, our quinoa porridge and our polenta porridge in the morning, especially in this cooler weather. Those are awesome, by the way. They're the great morning foods that just really, like, they're so energizing, and they just tide you throughout the day, especially on super cold days. And throw a little bit of microgreens in there, you're all set. So, and I cook them in bone broths a lot of the time as well too, so you're getting that added value as well too. And then you'll be all set, Julia. So there you go. Okay. And I think that's going to be it for us today. All right then. Well, thank you all so much, everybody who's still here. And for those of you that already came and left, we're so blessed to have you. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for being here and for showing up for yourself in this way. And, you know, again, take advantage of me being here to help you, to support you. You know, if it's something private, reach out to me. You all have your one-on-one sessions. I'm gonna check again. I hadn't seen. I was still missing some questionnaires from folks. So if you haven't filled out your questionnaire yet, please do that. It's pinned to the top of the group, and then we can set up your first session. Because you, if you're new to the program here for the fall, you have 2 sessions, and now would be a really good time to set up your first one to help kind of lay a foundation for the things that we've been learning, and then save the other one for the end, and we can look at how to customize everything into a specific way that just works for you, that's tailored to you. And that's why I've thrown these one-on-one sessions in here as a bonus gift to all of you as well too, so that you know, can personalize it, begin to understand how to take that and really make it your own. Okay, so on that note, sending you all massive love and blessings on this
Thank
most magnificent
you.
day. Thank you, and we'll see you all next Wednesday at 12:30, and we'll be diving deeper into how specific foods support us at different times of the month for your menstruating women. And then we'll also talk about how that affects us as postmenopausal too. And I would love to hear, I really want to dive into this with Robin next week too. I want to hear how this ties into anything you might have to add in the birth related realm of, you know, pregnancy as well as postpartum, and how we can put that all together in our module for next week as well too. So I'll hand
Amazing.
it out again on Tuesday for everybody, and I will see you then. Bye, everybody.
Bye.